Today, we are talking about Trump's tariffs. We're going to talk about Elon Musk's Doge crew taking over federal agencies. We're going to talk about government employee buyouts. We're going to start the show, though, by highlighting a few things that you don't need to pay attention to yet. Welcome to The Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm your host, Blake Fisher. Thank you for spending some of your valuable time with me. Look, if you're paying attention to the news at all, it's been like trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. Not just a fire hose, fire hydrant. I guess it's the similar thing, but the point is, it's been kind of crazy. And I think it's like, how do I cover Trump? Because it's been an interesting dilemma for me, because just to let you in behind how my brain works, it's been hard to figure out because there's such a flurry of things happening. He signed a gajillion executive orders and he says exactly, I don't think there is even, like, I'm a guy that likes to think things in my head for a long time sometimes before I ever let that idea out. I ponder things. I'm up at night sometimes. I can't go to sleep because my brain won't shut down. I think Donald Trump, the second a thought comes into his mind, he just starts speaking. And, maybe that's how he's an auditory processor. That's fine. The problem is when he's doing it on a microphone in front of the press, you can run into some issues. You can end up in a situation where you are saying something out loud that causes real disruptions, that you're maybe like, there are real consequences to the president of the United States saying things. And so I understand this is how Donald Trump is. He's not going to change, but it is exhausting to try to figure out what to pay attention to because there are so many things happening. And I think that the media at large is still not quite figured out how to handle it. Because, for instance, last week, the top story of the week seemed to be, did Elon Musk do a Nazi salute at this thing? It's a nonsense story for a couple of reasons. Like, one, we've got video of Kamala Harris doing the exact same thing to a crowd at the top of arena. Tim Walz doing the same thing. Like, exact same motion. Hand over the heart, and then, like, my heart goes out to you. It's like the sign language version of my heart goes out to you. This is not a story that we need to be talking about when there are a lot of other things that actually matter. And there's also this thing that happens in the media, specifically the anti-Trump stuff, which, I'm obviously in that group. That's why this is called The Homeless Conservative. I don't think he's going to be a great president. I have not voted for him. But I also don't need to exaggerate the things that are bad about him. You can just say what's true and then let people make up their mind if that's bad or not. Or let's be outraged about things that we think are outrageous. But I'm seeing all these things that are frankly just freak out, hair on fire style stuff for things that are in the news cycle for that long, because sometimes he's not serious about it. Sometimes someone talks him out of the thing after he says the thing at the press conference. So there's quite a bit of stuff that you don't need to pay attention to. And I've not been able to figure out how to say that on this show because I don't want to cover everything that Trump does. If I had a 2-hour show every day, but I don't want to have that kind of show. Currently, I think that you should be able to pack what people need to know into less time than that. I don't think every American citizen needs to pay attention to the news as much as I do. If you enjoy doing it, that's great. But, it's important to be informed, but you also don't need to be informed of everything, because if you spent 2 hours a day listening to podcasts, listening to talk radio, watching CNN, reading the news, whatever it is, there's so much stuff in that period of time that will not matter potentially the very next day, the way that Trump's administration moves. It certainly probably won't matter at all the week after, and I don't think it will not matter long term. I'm trying to only talk about things that I think are going to matter in the long run. I don't want to talk about things if I don't think they're going to matter in 30 days. If we're going to forget that story happened in 30 days, I'm probably not going to talk about it. But some of these things are worth mentioning because everyone else is talking about them. Some of them I don't think are worth it. I don't think that we will be talking about Elon Musk's Nazi salute in 30 days. So that's why I didn't talk about it last week. I'm only highlighting it today because it's an example of one of those stories that I think is worth highlighting. So that's the top of the hour here. We're just going to say, what are these things? What are these things that you're going to see in the news, or you're probably bubbling up to your social media stuff, but I don't think we either have enough information yet to make a judgment on, or they just frankly don't matter because they're never going to happen. So the first thing that's never going to happen is yesterday, Trump announced a Gaza plan just off the top of his head, it seems, at a press conference. And so the reason I'm not going to cover this forever is because it's never going to happen. But you're going to see every headline today is going to be talking about this, and probably for the rest of the week and maybe onward. But it's never going to happen. His plan for Gaza, just so you know, is he's going to kick all the Palestinians out. They're going to go to other countries like Egypt and Jordan, despite Egypt and Jordan not wanting Gazans. And we're going to clear all the rubble. We're going to build, I guess, a new version of Mar-a-Lago. We're going to own that little strip of land from now on, and then we'll invite people back into, but it'll be kind of like this neutral U.S. controlled territory. This is literally all stuff that he said, by the way. I'm not making any of this up. I mean, the reasons it's never going to happen, just really briefly, the Palestinians in Gaza support Hamas, for the most part, and they like that they're controlled by a terrorist organization that uses them as human shields, I guess, because in the end, they think that sacrifice is worth it to eliminate all the Jews and the state of Israel. So, and the problem, like I said, Egypt and Jordan don't want these people. They do not want these people that support terrorism inside of their countries. So you're not going to be able to kick them out. Not to mention, Donald Trump has ran on stopping these wars and not sending any troops in, but he's already threatened to invade Greenland, take the Panama Canal back by force, and send troops to the most dangerous region potentially in the entire Middle East for U.S. soldiers to be in. And that's his game plan, is to send U.S. soldiers to Gaza to, I guess, kick everyone out and then rebuild it. This is never going to happen. This is him spitballing stuff, and I'm sure smarter people, even his most loyal people in his administration, will go, this is impossible. It's not going to happen. But you're going to hear about it in the news for a while. So that's one thing that's not going to happen, okay? Another thing that's not going to happen, even though we're going to hear about it and people are going to complain about it, including me, I do not think Republicans or Democrats will reject any of the nominees that Trump has nominated for the cabinet, specifically the three that are the most, controversial or, in my opinion, disqualified from the job descriptions that they're going to take over. Would be RFK Jr. for Health and Human Services, Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, and Kash Patel as the head of the FBI. Their confirmation hearings, I don't think Democrats didn't do a very good job of asking good questions and holding their feet to the fire on their previous statements, because all three of these people, essentially the problem is they've all been sort of wild conspiracy theorists in the past. And I don't feel like even the Democrats that tried to call them on the quotes, they just evaded the question. Kash Patel would not admit that none of these people, actually, none of his nominees have admitted that Joe Biden won the election in 2020. I think that's disqualifying, but whatever. It seems like enough Republicans, including any of them that had reservations about any of these people, are probably going to let him go through. It's not worth the fight with Trump. I don't think they'll be good at the jobs. So at this point, it will turn into let's just watch them fail, because they probably will. And I could be wrong about that. But I don't think the fight to say these people are disqualified, they are, but I think it's going to happen. So Republicans are not going to probably reject any of those. Those are probably the two biggest things this week that are sort of distractions. And I think here's one thing about the Trump administration that I've got to say on top of the way the media covers them. I think this is purposeful. I think that there is a method to the madness sometimes where they sign so many executive orders and they do so many things and so many things in their news, and Elon Musk is tweeting certain things or whatever. I think some of it is purposely distracting us from the things that really matter. And so that's what I want to talk about the rest of the time. So let's talk about the things that I think do really matter, even though one of them didn't happen technically. So tariffs. So over the weekend, this was such a head-spinning situation. Over the weekend, we had Donald Trump announce that he's going to apply 25% tariffs to Mexico and Canada. The only exclusion to Canada was it's going to be 10% on oil and gas, and then 10% tariffs on China. So he announces these. He says tariffs are good. He says tariffs are the most beautiful word in the English language. It's better than love. Tariffs are better than love, everyone, just so you know. And he says they're going to get our economy back. We could get rid of the income tax. He's all these things that he loves about tariffs, that this is the reason we're doing these tariffs, and we're going to have better manufacturing here in the United States. Gives all these reasons. He says there's nothing that Mexico and Canada can do to stop these tariffs from happening. This is Saturday, I'm pretty sure. By By Sunday and Monday, basically the tariffs don't exist anymore because he has a call. This is according to Donald Trump. He has a good call with the president of Mexico, and she has promised to send 10,000 troops to the border, to the Mexico northern border, our southern border, to help control the flow of fentanyl. So this was now all of a sudden Trump's mission for the tariffs. So it's not because they're good for the economy. It's not that we're going to have the best economy ever. It's not any of those other reasons that he said on Saturday. It's, guess what? I got the president of Mexico to send 10,000 troops to the border and to help us stop the flow of fentanyl that's killing so many Americans. Good goal to stop fentanyl from coming across the border. But again, he didn't mention any of that when he imposed the tariffs or announced the tariffs. There's a couple problems with that. First of all, Mexico has sent troops to the border multiple times, and they already promised this in November. This is already a thing that they had worked out with each other. There's really no difference between it. So I don't see what he got. This already happened in November, Mexico said. Furthermore, Mexico has sent troops to both borders of Guatemala, their Mexico southern border and our northern border. They did so in April of 2021, and we should just take a look at let's look at the border enforcement numbers from 2021 and see if you think that we're any better off here. So here we go. I've got to pull up my thing. Sorry, here we go. Here are the border numbers. Let me find that. I've got it up here somewhere. Well, I thought I had the border numbers up here. Oh, here we go. Border numbers. So April of 2021. If we go back to October, fiscal. These are fiscal years. And just so you know, it's a little confusing because it says October of 2021 is before April of 2021. That's because the federal government's fiscal year starts in October. So we are currently in fiscal year 2025, but that started in October of 2024. So October fiscal year 2021, that is when Trump is in office, and we've got 72,000 people that crossed the border in October of 2020. And then it starts, look at that. Joe Biden becomes president in January, and it immediately jumps, 20-something thousand people in February. It goes up 73,000 to 173,000 in March, 178 in April, 180 in May, 189 in June, 213,000 in July, up to 209. So we're increasing dramatically as Biden is the president. And if you notice, I said April of 2021 is when Mexico sent 10,000 troops to the border. Do you see any decrease in the numbers of people that were coming across the border? And I would assume, therefore, as many drugs were potentially coming across. Now, there are drug seizure numbers and things like that. My point is only that there is nothing that says Mexico sending troops to the border causes fewer people to come across the border or fewer drugs to come across the border. There's a lot of complications there because the cartels have infiltrated essentially every layer of government, including some speculation that I don't think is quite speculation, but it's fairly well proven that the previous president was corrupted. His administration was on the take from cartels, and this new president is essentially his handpicked successor. So I don't have a lot of faith that if we can get all the way up to the presidential level, that we're not also infiltrating the military, because they've infiltrated police and mayors and all sorts of other people in the Mexican government. This is nothing. This is absolutely nothing. But Trump threatens the tariffs. He doesn't really threaten the tariffs. He just says they're a good thing. And then he takes them away and says, well, I got what I wanted. So this is Trump changing what the tariffs are supposed to do, because it's not really about getting something from Mexico. And by the way, it said the same thing about Canada. Oh, all right, Canada gave us what we wanted. We now have a fentanyl czar on the northern border, even though Canada, in December, previously, before Donald Trump was even president, although it was in negotiation with his new administration, had promised to help shore up the northern border. This is ridiculous. You can't use tariffs as a blunt object to beat every country into submission, especially ones that we are friendly with. Canada is by all means one of our closest allies. And you're just going to slap a 25% tariff on them for no reason other than you think you like tariffs, and that's it. The problem is the market started going down, and so did business leaders, and I'm sure Republicans in Congress, and lots of people went to Trump over the weekend and said, please don't do this. This is going to be disastrous. If you're a business, just a small example, the second it got announced, I was like, I'm going to go look at what the maple syrup we buy at Costco costs, because it's from Canada. It's normally $12. We really like maple syrup in this house. And $15 immediately. So you can do the math on that. $3 increase, $3 is 25% of $12. Costco just immediately made everything 25% more expensive if it was from Mexico or Canada. And that's a price increase that people are going to feel in their wallets, which is what I've always said about tariffs. It's not what I've said, it's what every economist says about tariffs. For the most part, they are going to increase the prices of anything that we import from those countries. And if we don't import the stuff from those countries, again, this is the protectionist argument against or for tariffs. It would be, okay, well, we are tariffing the Canadian maple syrup to try to protect the Vermont maple syrup, right? And so, but that gives Vermont maple syrup the ability to increase their prices by potentially 0 to 25%. Now, that doesn't mean they're guaranteed to increase their prices, but they certainly allowed to because they realize their competition is definitely going to be 25% higher. So it allows prices to increase even if they're not foreign made. Not to mention maple syrup is very simple because it just comes out of a tree and they refine it and then they put it in a bottle. You can do that entire manufacturing process inside of the US or inside of Canada. But other things are more, a washing machine, for example, has a lot of different parts, or a car that we make potentially has a lot of parts, and some of which are made here, some of which are made at other places. And there are tariffs on any of those individual pieces that come in too. So tariffs are a bad tool for this, but Trump is especially using them poorly because all of this is non-falsifiable. His defenders are going to say, look, it worked. And I go, no, it didn't, because the way you do that, if you're going to try to use tariffs as a negotiating tool, you could look to just last week when Donald Trump, while trying to send criminal migrants that we are trying to get out of the country, we sent a couple planes to Colombia, and the president of Colombia said, no, we're not going to accept those planes. And Donald Trump said, if you don't accept those planes, we're going to slap a 25% tariff on everything that comes from Colombia. And next week, we're going to change it to 50%. And do you know what Colombia did? They accepted those planes of Colombians back into Colombia. So that is how you're going to use it, is you say, we want you to do this, or you're doing a bad behavior. We do this with Russia, for example, with sanctions. Sanctions are obviously worse than tariffs because sanctions are just saying we will not import any of this stuff. The point is we try to use economics in some of these countries to correct bad behavior. And Russia would be an example of Russia goes into Ukraine. Lots of different countries said, we're going to put sanctions on you, or Iran tries to do nuclear weapons. And we say there's a lot of sanctions that are going on to deal with that. That is how you use economics to get a better behavior. You say, you are doing X and we don't like X. And if you don't stop doing X, we are going to sanction you. We're going to tariff your goods, whatever. And you can put pressure on them economically. But what he did to Canada and Mexico, first of all, is not necessary. I think he can get all the concessions he wants from Mexico. He already got most of them. I mean, he already got them to agree to remain in Mexico for migration. He'd already gotten, like I said, troops in November promised from the new president. So this is all pointless, but what it does do is it really disrupts North American trade. And that might not seem like anything, and for everyone else it was a blip, but if you own a business that sells things or makes things in North America, and by that I mean all of North America, Canada, Mexico, United States, you're probably not hiring people right now because you don't know if he's going to do this again. You're trying to make projections for the whole year or further out than that, and you don't know what the price of the goods that you need to make your goods are going to cost. And maybe, like for a lot of companies, that might put their goods over a line where people will no longer buy them. And you're talking about job loss, you're talking about economic problems with U.S. companies. So the very thing that he's trying to do says that these things are so great are going to hurt U.S. companies. And like I said, that might make someone go, okay, well, that thing got 25% more expensive. I'm not going to buy that thing. And then you've got people having to lay people off. This is a problem. And Trump has zero understanding of how it works. He claims, you hear him and his defenders say this all the time, tariffs are a way that other countries will pay for. They're not paying their fair share, or he'll say, we're getting screwed in this trade deal and China's going to pay. That's not how that's not how tariffs work. The importer pays the tax. So if you import something, if you've got a business and you need a widget and you order it from China or Mexico or Canada or whatever, and it shows up here, China's got a 10% tariff, that shows up, you are paying $1.10 for that. Or in the case of the threats against Canada and Mexico, you are paying 25% more. So if the widget costs $1, you're paying $1.25. That's the importer, the company that imports that is paying that. They're just passing that down to the American consumer. So or the consumer wherever they are, because we also export a lot of stuff from here. We actually do manufacture a lot of goods that go to other countries. And then that's not even to talk about the retaliatory tariffs that are going to happen. You put a tariff on Canada, they already started to threaten, and specifically Canada, I think this was actually smart too. They were targeting red states. They were targeting states that voted for Trump, and they were targeting their industries and their companies. So instead of just doing a broad-based one, they were trying to make the people that elected Donald Trump feel the pain, which I think is smart, because I honestly, that's what I want. I want the people that voted for Donald Trump to feel some pain for their actions, because we knew this was going to happen. He was claiming he was going to put 10 to 25% tariffs on the whole rest of the world. So we knew he wanted to do this. This is a crazy economic idea. It's a terrible idea. And let's make the people that elected him first feel that squeeze. I hope that what's happening is that he's learning that this is not a good way to do things. But maybe he's not. But we'll see. As for now, they are paused. But pausing stuff, again, gives the stock market and American companies no confidence of what's going to happen. And the stock market likes to have confidence in what's going to happen. We get really nervous when there is uncertainty in the future. And that's bad for all of us. That's bad for your 401k, by the way, when the stock market dips. That's bad for a lot of people. Okay. So the tariffs, I hope he learns a lesson. Now, China's a little bit different story. 10% tariffs on China is sometimes a punishment for China's bad practices as a government, and how they steal our intellectual property, and they are hacking our infrastructure. They are allegedly there's some gray areas here, but it does look like China is at least responsible or encouraging or paying for these ships that are going out and cutting the internet cables to, I think they did it to it was Switzerland, I believe. I might have that wrong. But this is something that's been happening over the last couple months, where they're trying to sabotage other countries' infrastructure. So maybe tariffs are the right thing to do in that situation. Again, we're saying, here's a bad behavior we want you to correct. Or honestly, most of the fentanyl is actually coming from China. This is something China is willingly not enforcing drug laws, and they're not going after these people that are making fentanyl, because why would they? They're sending it to the United States, which is really interesting, by the way, to me. A lot of this fentanyl is manufactured in China, but the deaths from fentanyl in China are not actually happening at the rate that they're happening in the United States and Canada. It's clearly targeted at killing United States. I mean, I think that's potentially an act of war. They are sending poison and purposely killing our citizens. So China is really where you need to look and try to solve some of the fentanyl stuff. It's they are filtering that through the cartels in Mexico, but it's not the cartel's initiation of doing it. This is it's either the ingredients or the fentanyl itself is being manufactured in China and then sent to Mexico, and then the cartels are getting it into America. So if the goal is really the fentanyl stuff, he's still going about it the wrong way. So the tariffs, just a terrible idea. And even though it's one of those things that kind of sounds like the first thing that wasn't going to happen, it's such a bad idea, and it had a ripple effect even though it didn't go into effect, if that makes sense. Okay, second thing that we want to talk about is Doge. You've probably heard a lot about this Department of Government Efficiency, which is not technically in the Department of, there's not technically a Department of Government Efficiency. How this got legally set up is Barack Obama, there are some agencies and things that the executive branch can create. And then sometimes Congress will then codify that into law. So sometimes they're temporary things. And so the executive branch does have some, Congress has given them some power to create some of these things. So they created this digital agency that essentially was trying to shore up computer systems and things like that inside the government. And Donald Trump cleverly, or his lawyers actually cleverly, just had this Doge thing take it over. It says basically the Department of Digital Information became Doge, essentially, except it's still called the digital something, I don't know, whatever the name of it is. And then they also are going to sunset that program, I think, in July of 2026. And so the reason that's smart is that makes it under the presidential, the executive branch. And so it's an executive it's harder to get information. It's not like the Freedom of Information Act when something is approved by Congress or is a congressional kind of thing. So it kind of can hide them a little bit in the shadows. It also puts it fully under the executive branch, and he can hire different kind of people without doing certain congressional oversight because it's a temporary hire. And so anyway, there's some smart legal things that they did here. So the first thing you need to know about this Doge is that its initial, this is Elon Musk, and it was Vivek Ramaswamy, although he's already been kicked out of the thing. There's already some fractures in the MAGA coalition. So originally, the intent was Elon Musk said, we're going to cut $2 trillion from the national budget every year. That's what they were going to make things more efficient, and they were going to cut waste and fraud and stuff. I've gone over how that's not possible. It's not possible because if you take basically, Donald Trump said you can't touch entitlements, which is, mandatory spending. So things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, these are things that are required of the government, and they are spending that we have to do. And it's not discretionary spending. Discretionary spending would be even like the military is, for example, discretionary spending. But Trump said he also can't touch the military. Now, that's a problem for me because I think most of the waste and fraud and kind of bloating of that stuff is in the Pentagon. I actually think they're the ones that can't pass an audit, and they're the ones that actually need to. There's probably the most stuff that we could cut from there without actually cutting our defense preparedness. Like, I don't think we have to fire people or even have fewer weapons. I think we can just go, there was an example, I think, from the Reagan administration, and I might have this wrong, and I need to look it up. I might look that up in a second, but it was basically this really complicated line item that cost $800, and it was like a manual for, I can't remember the exact, but it was a hammer. But it didn't call it a hammer on the line item. It called it a manual force by, and some sort of weird thing, right? It's a hammer. That's someone cleverly charging $800 for a hammer. That's a grift, okay? Or graft, I think technically is what that is when you're in political stuff. But so the point is, there's probably a lot that could be cut there, but Donald Trump said you can't go there. So the entirety of our the entirety of our discretionary budget every year by $6 trillion budget is less than $1 trillion. So there's no way Doge could cut $2 trillion from the budget because Trump said you can't go into this other stuff. And there's no way you could cut all of that spending, all of the discretionary budget that is not military, and it's less than $1 trillion. So we're not solving the debt crisis. The people that are excited about this, frankly, you just got to look at the numbers. So that was the first thing. Now it's kind of evolved. They've talked a lot less about cutting spending and more talked about trying to make the government more efficient. So the news this week is that Elon Musk goes into the United States. What is it called? Hold on one second. The foreign assistance. I should know this off the top of my head. So USAID is the acronym. U.S. Agency for International Development. That is what it's called. And this is a fund that was set up by John F. Kennedy, and the purpose of it was to do foreign aid for basically making like America look good in the rest of the world and doing some things that we, at the time, keep in mind we're in the Cold War. This is a Cold War style thing of giving capitalism a good name, giving America a good name, and this is a fight that we're doing with Russia, essentially. Like, Russia's trying to influence countries with communism. We're trying to influence it with capitalism. So this is during the Cold War. It does get codified by Congress, though. And there are a lot of problems with it. There are a lot of problems with USAID, but Elon Musk goes into this, and he goes into it with these 20-year-old kids. And everyone's up in arms because they're like, this is illegal. He can't go in there. He doesn't have the right. He doesn't have clearance. And there's all these fights. The truth is we don't know all the information there. The last I heard, I have not heard if Elon Musk or any of these 20-something employees that aren't really employees, they're basically volunteering to do this work, are coming in. And it sounds a lot like what Elon Musk did at Twitter. He basically went in there with his engineers and cleaned house and started interviewing people. What do you do? And they're firing people. They're letting people go. And Elon Musk's view and what he's been tweeting is like, this whole thing is corrupt. It's a bunch of criminals. We're shutting the whole thing down. Now, it's true. Elon Musk has no authority to shut down a United States agency that was created by Congress. He has no authority to do that. He can go back to Congress and recommend it. The executive branch does have some ability to obviously fire people. And so here's what you need to know. The executive branch, Donald Trump is the head of the executive branch as the president. He absolutely has the right to send anyone he wants to into any of those agencies and look under the hood. He actually he is the president of the United States. He can, he can declassify anything he wants to. Obviously he can get people security clearances. I would assume that Elon Musk has that at this point. I don't know though. We can't know for sure. But there's been conflicting information about if they're accessing classified stuff or not anyway. So, but everyone's up in arms about this. And I get that it's a little crazy, but here's the two sides I think you should look at it from. I think in November, it was clear that there was a vote that said, we are tired of the way the federal government has been working. I think that's what's been happening for a decade now. I think most times we're just going, all right, you didn't do a good job at running the federal government and doing the things that the government's supposed to do. Let's try the other party. And then we switch back and forth. The federal government and the bureaucracy is a mess, and it's bloated and it's inefficient and it's slow. And there's all sorts of things that are bad about it. I'm not saying there aren't good people in the government. I'm not saying it's all woke nonsense. I mean, that's everyone's going at Trump's big thing is like blaming everything on DEI. And I'm not saying that's the case here. But USAID has a lot of problems. There's certainly been corruption. Going back to we had whistleblowers in the 90s saying that the funds were, even though they were specifically set aside and the rules of the funds where you cannot do racial preferences, you can't do this kind of stuff, that was happening with the money in South Africa, that there were racial preferences going on. So there's been whistleblowers and stuff. And here's a few things that are worth paying attention to that USAID. Actually, before I get into the USAID stuff, sorry, I'm all over the place because I put this together too quickly. Let's talk about the sort of painting of Elon Musk and this crew of young coders with no experience coming in there, no government experience coming in there. I think that's kind of what we need. And there's this great article from the Free Press that you should read. I'll have all these. Every article I mention is going to be in the show notes below. But this basically just outlines all of the presidential aides and government employees that were like 20, 21, 22 at the time that did some amazing things in the past. So for example, these are smart kids. These are people that are all very, very savvy technologically. And look, on the bright side, I think that the government systems probably need some of that. I've said for a long time, we've got to find a way to get the best engineers to work for the government for a short time. And that might mean paying them a lot of money. Traditionally, like these government jobs don't pay very much, especially these sort of entry-level ones where you want young 20-something-year-olds in there. That's why you don't see, there's not a lot of White House or congressional aides that are in their 40s. They're all in their early 20s. So the point being that I think we need the shakeup. I think that we need to send outside people in. I don't know if Elon Musk is the right guy. I wish Elon Musk had a little more, if we're talking about tech people, I wish he had a little more Bezos in him, like a little bit more, thinking things through a little bit more. But you can't argue with the fact that he's a successful CEO, and CEOs it's not easy to be a CEO of a company like Tesla or SpaceX and things like that. You can't deny his talent for this, in my opinion. I'm not saying I like everything he says or does. I'm just saying I think that kind of outside the government perspective is potentially good. Now, I don't like him going in and saying that USAID is, it's all worms, no apple. That's, I think, his exact quote. So the point is, but people are freaking out and the media is freaking out about these young kids. Well, this Free Press article has a few examples that are worth noting. The guy that wrote the line in Reagan's speech where and this is coming from that Free Press article, Robinson helped write Reagan's famous speech where he implored Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down this wall. That was he was 20 something years old at the time. And that was the other people around Reagan did not want him to say that line. They were actually opposed to it. And this young guy, I mean, that's one of the most famous things ever. We also had, let's see, what else did they do? Okay. Then there was a President Harry Truman's decision to recognize the state of Israel. He brought in a young lawyer named Clark Clifford to argue the case for recognizing the Jewish state, which he was fiercely opposed by his Secretary of State, George Marshall, who had been the top general in World War II. So this Free Press article goes over several administrations where some 20-year-old kid that's an aide or a speechwriter or something like that has I mean, I would say altered the course of history and came in with a fresh perspective that people that had been in the bureaucracy for a long time didn't. So I am not going to discount these people until I see the work they do. I'm not going to judge them based on speculation. I think that's wrong to do. I think we need some young blood in there. And these people are essentially volunteering their time. They're not getting paid, apparently, and they're coming to fix the government. I think there's something kind of cool about that, and I'm not going to crap on it until they do something that I don't like. That being said, Elon Musk goes into USAID and says, we're shutting this whole thing down. Again, I do not think constitutionally he or the president have the authority to do that. They're trying to kind of circumvent it by saying it's going to be under the Secretary of State. So Marco Rubio is going to be in charge of it now. And look, there is a lot of bad things that happen in this USAID stuff, including USAID is the one who gave money to, oh gosh, I just forgot the name of the company, but basically it was a fund that then gave that money to the Wuhan Institution of Virology. And so we gave $1 million. We, the taxpayers of the United States, gave $1 million that went to USAID, that went to this other company, that then went to the Wuhan Institution of Virology. So we absolutely could have been responsible for the COVID lab leak. This specific agency could have been. Now that did get shut down under Trump, actually before COVID. And so this was pre all that stuff. But my point is, there are some bad things that it does. So here's a few things from a Jim Garrity article in National Review. So U.S. taxpayers shouldn't be footing the bill for a version of Sesame Street in Iraq. USAID didn't need to invite 14 travel writers to Kazakhstan to promote tourism in that country. We shouldn't be giving a dime to any entity that is working with the Taliban-run Afghan government. And the same goes for any organization working with the Houthis and Hamas. So those are some bad things, okay? But here's some gray areas that he points out. If you're bothered by the number of illegal immigrants from Honduras crossing our southern border, in fact, sorry, I just realized if you're watching this, that's so small you probably can't read it. Okay, let's go back to it. Where was it? Okay. If you're bothered by the number of illegal immigrants from Honduras crossing our southern border, you might want to have USAID funding programs that promote sustainable reintegration of these migrants into their communities, helping to reduce repeat migration. That sounds like a good thing. Or, for example, maybe you don't think USAID needs to spend $183 million over 5 years for for a dioxin remediation at the airbase. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. The primary Agent Orange storage and handling site during the U.S.-Vietnam War and the largest remaining hotspot in Vietnam. That was our government that put the Agent Orange there. It seems worthwhile for us to be the people that help clean it up. I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that actually, that's a good thing. That's us like cleaning up our mess. I think that's potentially a good thing. Or here's another thing. Where's the other thing? Okay. In fiscal year 2024, the U.S. Agency for International Development spent $406 million on grants for programs aiming to fight tuberculosis, $795 million to fight malaria, $935 million for children's health, $159 million in nutrition programs, $700 million in health security efforts, which track Ebola, Zika, H1N1, influenza, COVID-19, and antibiotic resistance. So these are all, some of this stuff is good. And I don't like that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are just going in there with a sledgehammer and saying, we're going to get rid of all this stuff. Some of it is doing really good things. And pay attention. This is something I was not aware of until yesterday. China and Russia are cheering this on, us shutting down USAID. Why do you think our geopolitical enemies would be cheering that on? I think it's because they can then swoop in there and do those things. And now China and Russia are the good guys. America abandoned us and used to help us with these things. They've abandoned us. And here's Russia and China. That is the game we're playing right now in this sort of Cold War, sort of new Cold War, sort of with China that's going on, is over influence. And if we're not there influencing people, China will be. We've got to consider that. Now, do I think this agency needed serious reform? Absolutely. I think a lot of bureaucracies in the federal government need serious reform. But we can't just knock the whole thing down and not expect there to be some problems, because same thing with the freezing of these funds. Marco Rubio saying that this stuff is free to go. Like, oh yeah, they're good. They can give the malaria medication and things like that, but the funds are frozen. So those agencies, whether they're employees, they're military, some of them are organizations, nonprofits, that is getting this money. If they don't have the money, they can't keep doing the job. So they're already recalling most of those employees from those areas. So it will be a mess to put this back together. And I think it would be better to go in there with a scalpel, right? To go, we're cutting this, we're not doing that. Yeah, let's look at every line item and make sure that US taxpayer dollars are going to things that we agree are good causes. But I want to point out the entire USAID budget is less than 1% of the entire US budget. People think we're spending 25% of our budget or something on sending foreign aid. You heard this all throughout the campaign. We shouldn't be spending money in other countries. We should be fixing problems here. They're not equivalent. With the entire budget of USAID, you could not solve any problem that people are talking about here. You really just couldn't. It's like pennies on the dollar because we're terribly inefficient. I just don't know what they expect to like get a pat on the back. But the truth is, the thing is, everyone's talking about this, and Donald Trump and Elon Musk will claim this is the victory. We've slashed it. We've crushed this government agency for less than 1% of the entire budget. I'm not saying every little bit doesn't count, but let's go through this line by line. Let's figure out where the inefficiencies are. And that brings me to the next thing, which is the government buyout of employees. So this is a thing Donald Trump has proposed and offered to government employees. And it has said that, look, here's how it can work. We're either going to start cleaning house, but before we start cleaning house, if you would like to take a buyout, we will basically pay your salary through September, through the end of the fiscal year, and you can quit. And you have to make this decision by February 6th. There's a lot of conflicting stuff on this, and a lot of people are up in arms about this. How could he possibly do this, right? This is illegal. That's what Tim Kaine, for example, said. Let's actually go to that. I think I've got that graphic up here somewhere. Let's see. Tim Kaine said... I think it's the right one. Nope, that's not it. Sorry. Nope, that's not it either. Sorry, I've messed it all up here. Okay. So Senator Tim Kaine has said that this is flatly just illegal. He doesn't think it's good at all. So he says, gosh, this is the wrong graphic too. I don't know where my graphic went. I apologize. I messed it up. I'm just going to pull it up here. Let's see. He said... Okay, here we go. There's no statutory authority that I can see for the president making this offer, said Senator Tim Kaine, who represents tens of thousands of federal workers, and said no constituents have told him they are taking the deal. And then he also said, and this is also still Tim Kaine, the federal employees received an interesting email at the end of the day today, referring to this buyout email. So tender your resignation, and then, boy, it's just going to be a gravy train. You're just going to get paid for 7 months without working. The president has no authority to make that offer. Tim Kaine is wrong on this because Bill Clinton did this in the 90s, actually, the exact same thing. In fact, he got a congressional bill to be passed to do so, but it was a little bit different, but he basically said, hey, if you want to volunteer, you can take either a severance package or $25,000, whichever is less. $25,000 in 1994. Obviously a lot more than it is now. And the only part of this that's illegal for Donald Trump to do is that $25,000 number is in the bill. So I do get Tim Kaine's point that, like, why would a federal employee take this when they might not actually be able to get their salary through September? Because allegedly it would be more than $25,000 probably for, 8 months of work. So that is potentially a hurdle. However, Donald Trump can probably just go to Congress and say, hey, can we just amend that bill to make it be a higher number and just be whatever the salary is? So this is not completely illegal. Tim Kaine's trying to make it act like Donald Trump has no authority to offer a buyout to people, but he does. The only legal problem I see with it is that he's saying it's paying you through September, and the one that happened in the 90s was like it was a severance package or $25,000. It sounds like it was more of a lump sum thing. But it does sound like he kind of has the authority, but would probably need Congress to amend that dollar amount. But this is not unheard of. This is something that Bill Clinton did in the 90s to try to do the exact same thing that Donald Trump's goals are. And I'm hearing Democrats like freak out over this stuff. And the truth is, Bill Clinton just was in a different situation in 1994 with a Republican-controlled House that wanted a budget that was not going into debt. And he got that, and he had to work with Republicans for that. And that was what the country wanted, was fiscal responsibility. And Bill Clinton's a good enough politician that he went along with it and was cutting things. So Bill Clinton's the one that initiated this. So let's not pretend that Donald Trump came up with this completely novel idea and it's completely illegal. I think it's kind of a ridiculous notion to think that it's not. However, yesterday we get news that he wants to buy out he offered this to the entirety of the CIA too. Again, I don't think that many people are going to take this. This is not going to be some kind of huge windfall budget things. I think one of the estimates I saw said, let's say if 10% of federal employees took that, and you took the average, take the average salaries, all those kind of things, it would save us $10 billion. $10 billion, I know sounds like a lot to you and me. I would love to have $10 billion, but $10 billion in the grand scheme of the federal budget of $6 trillion, and keep in mind, a billion goes into a trillion 1,000 times, okay? So $10 billion is like, not even 1% of $1 trillion, okay? That's a lot, right? So it's worth paying attention to that and noting that I don't think many people are going to take this. It's not going to be a huge budget windfall for us. CIA, I get a little bit worried about because I do think there are probably a lot of federal employees that are managing other employees and not really doing jobs. I'm sure there's a lot of inefficiency. I know there's a lot of inefficiency. The CIA is a little more specialized, and I am a little more concerned about those are not. I don't know that the CIA is something we want to screw around with. Hey, do a lot more with a lot less. That seems potentially dangerous to do. I kind of feel the same way about the FBI stuff. He is maybe going to fire a bunch of people that investigated the January 6thers or him. Again, you're firing people for doing their job. Their job was someone told them they had to investigate this thing, and they did their job. I don't think we should fire those kind of people. I don't think it's a great idea. I think the FBI needs reform for sure, but I don't think you just go in and fire everyone because they're your political enemy. This is going to backfire on Trump. And I would like Trump to succeed because I live here. And I think it's important that some of these goals are correct. Efficiency is a good goal. Not wasting money is a good goal. Reforming the FBI is a good goal. I don't think you do those things by doing performative stuff where you're cutting an agency that isn't even responsible for 1% of the budget. I don't think you do that by firing only the agents that investigated your allies. That doesn't seem like the American public are going to like that. And I think Donald Trump thinks he has this huge mandate. I think he thinks that he won in a landslide. He comes into his second administration with a 47% approval rate. It's lower than anyone other than Donald Trump in his first term. So 47% is fewer. That's a lower approval rating than he had, like, people vote for him in November. So to me, that means some people are already souring on it. And I think it only is going to take prices going up or, people getting fired, losing their jobs, the economy, the stock market going down. There are not that many things that people care about. I think most people are not paying attention to how tariffs work. Most people are not paying attention to this Doge stuff. Most people are not paying attention to any of that, but they will pay attention to if any of their goods go up in cost, or if inflation goes up, or if they lose their jobs, or companies stop hiring. Those are the things they're going to notice. And it only took 7 months for Joe Biden to lose favor with the American people. It was the Afghanistan withdrawal, and he never recovered from that. His approval rating never increased after that. It dipped, never came back up. That gave Biden like that long to do the things he wanted to. I think Trump would be wise to spend some time working with Congress to get some of these things passed as bills, because again, executive orders are temporary. If Democrats win the White House in 2028, a Democratic president could come in and undo everything that Donald Trump does with the stroke of a pen. It's very simple. So anything that he's doing with immigration, anything he's doing with the border, anything he's doing, which we saw, Joe Biden just undid all of Trump's border stuff because Trump, instead of pursuing actual immigration reform via Congress, did it with the stroke of a pen. And yeah, it worked while he was the president, but then Joe Biden comes in and undoes that stuff, and we get this flood of migrants that causes Democrats to lose the election in 2024. But the same thing can happen to Republicans, and it's foolish to not think that it won't. It's foolish to think that this is going to be Trump and then J.D. Vance and then J.D. Vance, and for the next 12 years, we're going to just have Republican control of stuff. I think it's very much more likely, because historically, it always happens this way. President wins, 2 years in, Congress flips to the other party. It happens almost every single time. The only exception to that is actually with Joe Biden. Republicans actually did not take back as many seats. They did take the House, I guess, actually, but not as forcefully as normal. So even though it was a very, very small margin, it was only like 4 seats, they did take it back. And so That's the most likely thing to happen. So Donald Trump has 2 years at max, and I think he should be spending time getting an actual immigration bill passed, doing some things that are Congress that are permanent, that it would take Congress to change, not just the stroke of the next Democratic president's pen. So these are things that I hope that he pays attention to, because I live here, right? And I would like to see him succeed. I don't have a lot of high hopes for that, though, because I don't think he can really change. All right, that is it for this episode of The Homeless Conservative. I'm sorry that was like drinking, again, from a fire hydrant. There's just a lot going on. I think what I'm going to maybe start doing, I think next Tuesday, I'm going to do a live show, Tuesday evening, I think at 8 p.m., but pay attention to Instagram and YouTube. I'll announce it on there. I'll put it in the community thing. I'll put it on a short or a reel or something, or a story. That's what they call them on Instagram. I think I'm going to do something like that Tuesday night, where we do a little more roundtable with a couple of guests and we talk about what happened that week and about what matters. And I'm probably going to try to have one show for sort of more big policy ideas. Let's talk about how to solve big problems. Let's talk about things that no one else is talking about that I think are real problems but aren't getting a lot of headlines. And then have another show for sort of the more political roundtable, what happened this week. Because sometimes, like I said, I'm trying my best to guess what's going to matter in 30 days. I think the economic repercussions of the tariffs are going to matter. I think this Doge stuff is going to matter because potentially, we're cutting agencies, we're doing this kind of stuff. But like I said, let's let some of this stuff play out before we judge it immediately. And that goes whether you're pro-Trump, anti-Trump. I don't like the reflexive, everything that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing good. Oh, the last thing I do need to mention about Elon Musk, real quick, that I forgot. I had in my notes, but I forgot. There are some people that are saying, maybe Elon Musk is the real president, Donald Trump isn't. I think it's a funny insult. Actually, I think it probably bothers Trump a lot. There's definitely evidence that Elon Musk tried to hire, one of these young people he wanted to hire was a Turkish national that's here on a visa, on a work visa. And he wanted him to come along for this Doge stuff and do stuff. And the White House said, absolutely not. You can't hire a foreign person when we're currently trying to say, we don't want foreign people taking American jobs. And he said, okay. So Elon Musk does appear to be actually listening to the administration, and he is not just on totally renegade all on his own, but that is what you will read a lot of. And like I said, let's see the results of it. I'm not super confident we're going to get a lot of great things out of this that are going to be consequential, but let's not jump to the conclusion that they are stealing private information and they're stealing social security numbers, and they're going to wreck the systems and it's dangerous. Let's not jump to all that stuff. I'm fine with saying it's illegal because I do think it is. I don't think he can actually shutter that government agency without congressional approval, and Donald Trump can't either, for that matter. But it's absolutely within Donald Trump's right as the head of the executive branch to look under the hood of any of these agencies and look line by line at the budgets and say, now he can't cut spending, but he can if it's not mandatory assigned spending, if it's just a budget for, and here's the things we want you to kind of do, he can move that money around within the executive branch. I mean, within those agencies. So if the FDA has X amount of money and he says, we're not going to do that kind of thing anymore, as long as Congress hasn't mandated that the FDA do that thing. For example, the FDA is mandated to say, approve drugs, but they're not mandated to keep looking into those drugs after they approve them and continue to do trials to see, are they continuing to be safe? They're not mandated to do that. So they have to do that budgetarily, find the money for it. So these are complicated things. The federal government is very complicated. We can't pretend that everything's solidly in the win column or solidly in the loss column. It's going to be nuanced. Okay. So I will try to help guide you through that nuance. So thanks again for joining me. Really appreciate it. If you can do one thing for me, rate the podcast wherever you listen to it. That helps a ton. It helps. I don't know how these things work on iTunes and Spotify and stuff, but it does help. So please do it. You can literally just give it the stars. You don't even have to write anything nice, but it does really help. If you can do two things, go follow or share something on YouTube or Instagram with someone that you think might enjoy it. That also helps kind of spread the word about me. Because again, I'm trying not to do outrage, I'm trying not to do fear mongering. And it's hard to compete with people that like to do outrage and fear mongering because algorithms really like that stuff because it's like crack cocaine for people. So pay attention to that. And I will really appreciate you being here. I will catch you next time.